Governor, the state of California currently holds the highest poverty level in the entire nation when adjusted for the cost of living at 23.5%. This statistic indicates that almost 1 out of every 4 residents in California exists in poverty, even though your state boasts the 5th biggest economy on the planet. How can anyone possibly characterize that situation as a triumphant narrative? The sharp voice of Ben Shapiro pierced right through Gavin Newsom's introductory remarks, like a surgical blade slicing through soft fabric. The crowd inside the Fox News studio, consisting of 200 individuals crammed into the custom-built auditorium, suddenly fell completely quiet. These events did not typically begin in such a manner, as usually moderators posed inquiries while opponents patiently awaited their specific opportunities to speak. However, Shapiro had abruptly disrupted Newsom's meticulously practiced opening speech regarding California's amazing achievements with a data point that transformed that achievement into an apparent disaster. Newsom hesitated right in the middle of his phrase, and his rehearsed grin wavered for just a brief second. He had only been 30 seconds into his starting presentation, the one concerning California leading the country in innovation, diversity, and climate action, when Shapiro derailed the entire thing with a single number. "Well, Ben, I am aware that you departed from California." Newsom attempted to shift the focus to personal matters to paint Shapiro as the villain for fleeing the state. "I departed because I was unable to purchase a home on a 6-figure salary while you reside in a mansion worth nearly $4 million that is funded by the taxpayers. Let us discuss the reasons why a prosperous podcast host could not afford to live in California while a public servant governor can live in opulence." The audience began to murmur, realizing that this encounter was going to be entirely different from what they expected. Bret Baier, the moderator from Fox News, seated between the two men, attempted to re-establish command over the proceedings. "Gentlemen, we have 90 minutes scheduled for this debate, so perhaps the governor should be allowed to answer the specific question." Shapiro replied that he was not moving his gaze away from Newsom, noting that the 23.5% poverty rate is the highest in the country. "You have served as governor for 6 years, and prior to that, you were the lieutenant governor and the mayor of San Francisco. You have held positions of authority in California for almost 20 years. Yet the poverty statistics have only deteriorated. So I ask you why." Newsom glanced toward Baier for assistance, but Baier simply looked back at him without intervening. This was a formal debate where questions were allowed, and Shapiro's inquiry was supported by legitimate statistics from the Supplemental Poverty Measure of the U.S. Census Bureau. California possesses the highest living expenses in the nation, Newsom stated, while attempting to appear rational. "That reality is a consequence of our prosperity, because people desire to reside here, and that demand drives costs upward. However, we are actively working on the issue of affordability." "You are working on it by exacerbating the problem," Shapiro interrupted immediately. "The median price for a home in California is $800,000, while the national average sits at just $417,000. Your specific regulations, your zoning laws, and your environmental restrictions make it unfeasible to construct housing, so prices rise and the middle class is forced to leave. You lost over 500,000 net residents between the years 2020 and 2023. They are not departing because California is too successful, but rather they are leaving because they simply cannot afford to exist there." Newsom's smile had vanished completely now, merely 45 seconds into the debate, and he was already forced onto the defensive. This scenario was not supposed to occur, as he was the charismatic governor with ambitions for the presidency. Shapiro was merely a fast-talking podcast host, and Newsom was intended to project leadership, while Shapiro appeared as an aggressive commentator. However, Shapiro possessed numbers, very specific numbers, and raw data did not care about personal charisma. "We are currently constructing more housing than ever before," Newsom tried to argue. "You are constructing luxury condominiums that cost $1 million, not homes that teachers, nurses, and firefighters can actually afford. That is the reason they are leaving. That is the reason I left. And that is why we will spend the next 90 minutes discussing why California has become unaffordable for the middle class under your guidance, despite having every natural advantage like weather, ports, and agriculture. The audience clapped, though not everyone joined in as it was a mixed crowd required by the debate rules, but enough people applauded that Newsom felt the sting. He had walked onto this stage believing he could charm his way through the night, pivot to attacking Trump and Republicans, and make the discussion about values and vision. Shapiro was not going to permit him to do that. This night was going to be focused on facts, numbers, outcomes, and results. And Gavin Newsom was about to find out that his political record could not survive that level of scrutiny. 6 hours prior to this moment, Gavin Newsom was seated within his private dressing room at the Fox News headquarters in New York, going over his notes one last time with his top aides. He felt quite positive and self-assured, as this specific debate had been in the planning stages for 3 full months. It started when Shapiro, a former resident of California who had moved to Florida, openly dared Newsom to support California's policies on a national broadcast. Newsom's team had initially brushed off the idea, telling him that a governor with presidential dreams should not debate a podcaster because it was beneath his station. Yet the challenge had gained significant momentum, as other pundits discussed it, and conservative news outlets ran with the story constantly. Was Newsom afraid to defend his own record? And even some liberal publications started questioning why he would not debate the policies of California. Eventually, Newsom's political strategists made the calculation that refusing looked weak, but accepting and winning would establish him as a reasonable progressive who could handle difficult inquiries. It could appeal to moderate voters and prove he was prepared for the national stage in 2028, so they agreed to the terms. Fox News was chosen as the compromise venue, which was Shapiro's territory, but with a professional moderator and standard debate regulations. There would be 90 minutes of airtime, opening statements, structured topics, closing arguments, and a live audience of 200 people selected to be balanced. "Remember the strategy?" his chief of staff said while reviewing the game plan one final time. "Remain calm. Do not let him rattle you with his rapid delivery, and pivot to values whenever he gets into the weeds. Make the conversation about vision versus negativity, and bring the topic back to Trump whenever it is possible. Remind the viewers that Shapiro supported Trump, and that this discussion is really about the future of the country." Newsom nodded his head, knowing he had participated in hundreds of debates, and this was just another one. Shapiro could speak quickly and throw out statistics, but Newsom had spent 6 years as governor, and 4 years before that as lieutenant governor. He understood California's policies thoroughly, and he could defend them effectively. And if he mentions the French Laundry incident, his communications director asked, "I apologized at the time. It was a lapse in judgment during a difficult period, so I took responsibility and will move on to how we handled the pandemic better than Republican states. If he brings up the private school your children attend, that is a personal family decision that I do not discuss in public. However, I am proud of California's investment in public education, which has the highest per-pupil spending in the nation." They had rehearsed all of these scenarios, ensuring every potential attack had a prepared response, and every criticism had a pivot to Republican failures. Newsom had been trained by the best media experts, and he was ready. What he did not know was that 3 floors below him, in a conference room converted into a war room, Ben Shapiro sat surrounded by a different type of preparation. Shapiro had spent 3 months focusing on this event, not just reviewing talking points, but actually conducting deep research. He had hired researchers to compile absolutely everything about California under Newsom's leadership, including every policy, every outcome, every failure, and every instance of hypocrisy. The war room resembled something from a prosecutor's office, with whiteboards covered in statistics and binders organized by specific topics. There were printed charts, graphs, photos, and receipts, including the actual itemized bill from Newsom's French laundry dinner that someone had leaked months prior. "Let us review the structure one more time," Shapiro said to his team. He spoke rapidly, as he always did, but with distinct precision. "We have 90 minutes divided into 6 segments of 15 minutes each, and I need to dismantle his arguments systematically." His lead researcher displayed the outline on a monitor for the team to see. Segment 1 involves opening statements and homelessness, so hit him with the $24 billion spent and the 42% increase to make him defend the indefensible. Segment 2 covers the middle-class exodus, focusing on the $500,000 net loss and U-Haul rates to make him explain why people are fleeing. Segment 3 is business flight, citing Tesla, Oracle, and HP, forcing him to explain why his tax base is departing. Segment 4 covers crime and Proposition 47, specifically the retail theft epidemic. So show the videos of people looting stores. Segment 5 is personal hypocrisy, covering the French laundry, private schools, and plumpjack wineries getting state benefits, forcing him to defend living differently than he governs. Segment 6 covers the failures like high-speed rail, energy costs, and water management, focusing on every big project that is over budget and under-delivered. Shapiro reviewed each section carefully, ensuring that for every topic he had specific numbers, examples, and contradictions between what Newsom said and what Newsom did. "The key is not letting him deflect the conversation," Shapiro stated firmly. "He is going to try to pivot to Trump, to Republican states, and to values. Every time he does that, bring the focus back to California, to his record, and to the results. Do not let him make this theoretical, but rather make it concrete." His producer asked the obvious question about what happens if he has good answers, or if the numbers are wrong. The numbers are not wrong because they come from the Census Bureau, from California's own budget documents, and from academic studies. He does not have good answers, which is why his team tried to avoid this debate for months. His record is indefensible, so I just have to make sure he cannot hide it with charm. At 8 p.m. Eastern Time, the lights illuminated the Fox News debate stage. Bret Baier sat in the center, with Gavin Newsom to his right, wearing a perfectly tailored Navy suit and looking every bit the future president he imagined himself to be. Ben Shapiro sat to his left, appearing more casual in slacks and a button-down shirt with no tie, and a stack of folders in front of him that looked ominous. "Good evening," Baier began, welcoming everyone to this special Fox News debate titled The California Clash. "We are here to discuss California's policies, challenges, and its future. Governor Newsom, you have 2 minutes for an opening statement." Newsom smiled into the camera, appearing warm, confident, and presidential. "Thank you, Bret, and thank you to Fox News for hosting this important conversation. I am proud to be here to discuss California's record of success under my leadership. California has led the nation in economic growth, and we are the 5th largest economy in the world. We have created more jobs than any other state, led on climate action by taking on the fossil fuel industry, and invested in clean energy. We have protected reproductive rights. We have stood up for immigrant families, and we have shown that progressive values and economic success go hand in hand." He was hitting his rhythm now, as this was the speech he had practiced. Now, I know my opponent tonight left California and decided our state was not for him, which is his right. But millions of people choose California every day because they choose our innovation, our diversity, our values, and our future. While Ben criticizes from the sidelines, I am doing the hard work of governing the largest state in America, creating opportunity, protecting rights, and building a future where everyone thrives. Governor California has the highest poverty rate in America when adjusted for cost of living. Shapiro's interruption hung in the air, and Baier looked startled. "Mr. Shapiro, the governor has 2 minutes, and he is using it to recite talking points instead of addressing reality. The poverty rate is 23.5%. the highest in the nation, meaning nearly 1 in 4 Californians is living in poverty despite having the 5th largest economy. How is that success? Bayer asked, while trying to maintain order. We will have time for rebuttals later, but I will yield my opening statement time. Shapiro said, I just want the governor to answer one single question. If California is so successful, why do you have the highest poverty rate in America? The audience was riveted, as this was not how debates usually went. Shapiro had calculated that interrupting Newsom's polished opening would throw him off balance and make him defensive from the start. Newsom tried to recover his smile, saying, Well, Ben, as I said, you left California, so perhaps you are not the best judge. I left because I could not afford to buy a house on a 6-figure income. I was making over $200,000 a year from my podcast and media work, yet could not afford a decent house in Los Angeles. I moved to Florida, bought a beautiful home for half the price, pay no state income tax, and have better schools for my kids. So, yes, I am very qualified to judge why the middle class is fleeing California. Answer the question about the 23.5% poverty rate and why it exists. Newsom looked at Bayer again, but received no help. California has a high cost of living because we are desirable and people want to live here. If people want to live there, why did you lose over 500,000 net residents in 3 years? That is 500,000 more people leaving than arriving, which represents a net loss. Those are not people who want to live in California. Those are people fleeing California. Some people left during COVID, and they are not coming back. The exodus started before COVID and accelerated after, meaning your state lost population for the first time in history, not because of a pandemic, but because of your policies. Newsom tried to pivot by saying, if you look at Republican states like Texas and Florida, they have their own problems. We are not debating Texas. We are debating California. Your state, your policies, and your outcomes. So defend them. Bayer jumped in, sensing this could spiral out of control. Let us move to our first structured segment regarding homelessness. Governor Newsom, California, has spent approximately $24 billion on homelessness since you took office. The homeless population has increased by 42% in that time, so what is your response? Newsom took a breath, happy to be back to prepared territory. Homelessness is a national crisis driven by housing costs, mental illness, and substance abuse. It is a California crisis. Shapiro interrupted again. You have 30% of America's homeless population with only 12% of the total population. This is not a national problem. This is your problem, and you have spent $24 billion making it worse. Shapiro pulled out a chart and showed it to the camera. This is California's homeless population from 2019 to 2024, starting at 151,000 and now at 181,000. That is a 42% increase, while you spent $24 billion. That is about $133,000 per homeless person. You could have bought each of them a house in most of America for that money. Newsom tried to interject that it was a mischaracterization of the funding. Where did the money go? I will tell you where it went. Consultants. The city of Los Angeles paid a consultant $800,000 to study homelessness. And do you know what they produced? A 200-page report recommending more study. San Francisco spent $60,000 per tent for safe sleeping sites. You can buy a small house in many states for $60,000, yet your state spent it on a tent. Shapiro was firing rapidly now, not giving Newsom space to respond. You built supportive housing units at an average cost of $750,000 per unit. The national average is $150,000, meaning you spent 5 times the national average. That is not a housing crisis. That is a corruption crisis. That is consultants and contractors ripping off taxpayers while homeless people die on the streets. The audience was completely silent, with some nodding and others looking shocked at the numbers. Newsom tried to regain control, stating that building in California is expensive because of land costs. Then change your zoning laws, change your environmental review process that takes 7 years to approve a project, and change your regulations that make it impossible to build. You control all of this because you have supermajorities in the legislature and you could fix it tomorrow. But you will not, because your environmental lobby will not let you. Your unions will not let you. And your consultants are making too much money from the current system. Shapiro pulled out photos, actual photos of homeless encampments in Venice Beach, San Francisco, and Oakland. This is what $24 billion bought. Tent cities that look like third-world countries. People are dying from disease and drug overdoses in broad daylight, so is this success? Newsom's face was flushed now as he claimed Shapiro was cherry-picking the worst examples. These are not cherry-picked, as this is Venice Beach, one of the most expensive zip codes in America. This is the Tenderloin in San Francisco, where people step over human feces on their way to work. This is Oakland, where homeless encampments stretch for blocks. You have been governor for 6 years, and this got worse under your leadership. Bayer tried to moderate, asking Governor Newsom how he responds to the cost per unit criticism. Newsom took a breath and tried to sound reasonable. Building supportive housing requires more than just construction, as it includes services, mental health treatment, and substance abuse counseling. Then itemize it, Shapiro demanded. Show me the breakdown of $750,000 per unit and where that money goes. What services cost $600,000 per person? Newsom did not have an itemized breakdown because if he did, it would show how much went to administrative costs, consultant fees, and union wages inflated by project labor agreements. It would prove Shapiro's corruption argument. These are complex projects, Newsom said. Complexity is an excuse for failure, as other states build homeless housing for a fraction of the cost. Other cities have reduced homelessness, but you have increased it while spending more than anyone. That is not complexity, that is incompetence. The first segment ended with Newsom unable to defend the homelessness spending. Bayer moved to a commercial break. In the green room, Newsom's team was in crisis mode. He is not letting you talk, his chief of staff said. You need to demand equal time because he is just throwing numbers at you. The numbers are real, so we need to pivot and make it about compassion versus cruelty and about values. But when they came back from commercial, Shapiro had more numbers ready. Next segment concerns California's population loss, Bayer said. Mr. Shapiro, you mentioned this earlier, so please expand on it. Shapiro pulled out a U-Haul price sheet, an actual printout from U-Haul's website. This is from last week, where I checked rental rates for moving trucks. Los Angeles to Austin, Texas costs $2,500 for a one-way truck rental. Austin to Los Angeles costs $500 for the same truck and same distance. Why is it 5 times more expensive to leave California than to move there? He let the question hang so the audience could figure it out. Because 5 times more people are leaving than arriving. U-Haul prices are set by supply and demand, and there is massive demand for trucks leaving California, but almost no demand for trucks going there. That is the market telling you that people are fleeing your state. Newsom tried to look unconcerned, stating that some people relocate for various reasons. 500,000 people net loss in 3 years are not random relocations. This is an exodus. I can tell you exactly who is leaving. The middle class, teachers making $65,000 a year who cannot afford rent, nurses who cannot buy homes, and firefighters who commute 2 hours because they cannot afford to live in the communities they serve. The middle class is being destroyed by your policies. Shapiro pulled out more statistics showing the median home price in California is $800,000, while in Texas it is $350,000. Same size house, but your policies, zoning restrictions, environmental regulations, and permit fees make housing artificially expensive, so the middle class leaves. Your gas prices are $5.50 per gallon, while the national average is $3.40. Your gas taxes and regulations add over $2 per gallon, meaning working families cannot afford to drive to work. Your state income tax is up to 13.3%, while Texas, Florida, Tennessee, and Nevada are all zero. You tax the middle class into poverty, and then wonder why they leave. Newsom tried to interrupt, saying, But we have better schools. You rank 40th in education outcomes, 40th. You spend $17,000 per student, which is the highest in the nation, yet rank 40th in results. Texas spends $12,000 and ranks 28th, meaning you spend more and get worse results. The audience gasped at that. Shapiro had the education statistics ready and highlighted in a binder. He pulled out the National Assessment of Educational Progress scores. 4th grade reading ranks California 37th, and 8th grade math ranks California 39th. Your schools are failing, and you know it, which is why you send your 4 kids to private school. Newsom's jaw tightened as he said, "My children's education is not a topic for debate." "It is completely relevant," Shapiro countered. "You send your kids to Sacramento Country Day School, which costs $30,000 per year per child for elite private education. But you oppose school choice that would let poor families send their kids to better schools. Why do you get to choose, but they do not?" "That is a personal family decision," Newsom repeated. "Exactly. It is a personal decision, and it should be a personal decision for everyone. But you keep Black and Hispanic kids trapped in failing public schools while your kids get an elite education. You will not even send your kids to the public schools you claim are adequate. If you do not trust them for your children, why should poor families trust them for theirs?" This hit hard, and the hypocrisy was undeniable. Newsom sent his kids to private school while opposing school choice, and the audience could see it. "I believe in strengthening public education," Newsom insisted. "Then send your kids there. Put them in Oakland public schools that rank in the bottom 10% nationally, or Sacramento public schools. Prove that you believe in the system you force everyone else to use." Newsom had no response to that because he would never send his kids to those schools. They were not good enough, and everyone watching knew it. Shapiro pressed the advantage, noting that this is the pattern with you. You live differently than you govern. You tell Californians to make sacrifices you will not make, to accept schools you will not accept, to pay taxes you avoid, and to follow rules you break. "Let me ask the audience," Shapiro said, turning to face the crowd. "How many of you used to live in California?" About 30 hands went up, representing 15% of the audience. "Keep your hands up," Shapiro said, asking how many left because it was too expensive. All 30 hands stayed up. "How many of you are better off now than you were in California?" All 30 hands remained raised. Shapiro turned back to Newsom and said, "There is your answer. The people who left your state are better off because they have more money, better housing, lower taxes, and a better quality of life. That is not success for California. That is failure." Newsom tried one more pivot, claiming, "We have incredible innovation and technology companies. Those companies are leaving. Let us talk about that." Shapiro pulled out another list. Tesla moved headquarters from Palo Alto to Austin. Oracle moved from Silicon Valley to Austin. Hewlett-Packard, born in California, moved to Houston. Charles Schwab moved from San Francisco to Texas, and CBRE Group moved from Los Angeles to Dallas. These are not small businesses. These are Fortune 500 companies, your tax base, and your job creators, and they are leaving. Why? Newsom tried to minimize it, saying, "We still have more Fortune 500 headquarters than any other state. You had more, but you are losing them, and you are losing their tax revenue and jobs." Elon Musk, who built Tesla in California, moved the company to Texas. He did not move because of weather. He moved because of your policies, your regulations, your taxes, and your hostile business environment. Shapiro had the receipts with actual quotes from CEOs explaining why they left. Elon Musk said, "California has become complacent about its economic success and has taken it for granted, and he is talking about you." Oracle CEO Larry Ellison said, "We were able to recruit better talent in Texas with a lower cost of living." Translation, your state is so expensive, people will not move there for jobs. HP CEO Antonio Neri said, "We need to be in an environment that allows us to operate efficiently." Translation, your regulations are strangling business. Newsom tried to defend, saying these are business decisions based on many factors. Yes, And all those factors point to California being a terrible place to do business. High taxes, extreme regulations, expensive energy, labor laws that make hiring difficult, and a legal environment that encourages frivolous lawsuits. You have created a hostile environment for business, and you wonder why they leave. Shapiro pulled out economic growth statistics. California GDP growth was 2.1% last year, while the national average was 2.5%. Texas was 4.3%, and Florida was 3.8%. You are growing slower than the national average despite having every natural advantage. And your per capita income growth, which is how much the average Californian's income grows, ranks 47th. 47th out of 50 states. You are one of the worst states in America for income growth. The audience was stunned that California, the success story, ranked 47th in income growth. Newsom tried to explain, "We have higher baseline income, so you are stagnant." Shapiro countered, "People in California are not getting richer. They are getting poorer relative to the cost of living," which brings us back to the poverty rate of 23.5%. Bayer jumped in, stating, "We need to move to our next segment, crime and public safety." Governor Newsom, Proposition 47, made theft under $950 a misdemeanor. Critics say this led to a retail theft epidemic. So what is your response? Newsom looked relieved to have a different topic. Proposition 47 was passed by voters, not by me. And crime statistics show that overall crime is down. Because stores stopped reporting, Shapiro said, "Ready for this. When district attorneys will not prosecute, why would stores waste time reporting theft? Let me show the audience what your policies created." He signaled to the control room, and a video played on the monitors. Security camera footage showed people walking into stores, filling garbage bags with the merchandise, and walking out. Security guards stood by, doing nothing. Multiple clips played from different stores and different cities showing the same pattern. That is San Francisco. That is Los Angeles. That is your policy. Theft under $950 is effectively legal, so people steal with impunity. Organized retail theft has become a business model. More footage showed people with shopping carts full of stolen goods walking out of Target, out of Walgreens, and out of CVS with nobody stopping them. Walgreens closed 17 stores in San Francisco because they could not operate with this level of theft. CVS closed 12, and Target had to lock up basic items. Deodorant is in locked cases, toothpaste, and shampoo. In one of the richest cities in America, you have to ask a clerk to unlock a case to buy deodorant. That is not a functioning society. The audience was watching the videos in stunned silence, some shaking their heads. This is what progressive prosecution looks like. Your district attorneys, appointed by officials you support, will not prosecute these crimes. San Francisco DA Chesa Boudin was so bad that liberal San Francisco recalled him and voted him out in a special election. That is how bad it got. Newsom tried to push back, saying public safety is a priority. Then why are stores closing and why are people fleeing San Francisco and Oakland? Why is Union Square, once the shopping destination of the West Coast, now half empty? Because stores cannot operate there. Shapiro had the statistics ready showing retail square footage in San Francisco is down 32% since 2019. Stores are leaving because they cannot stay in business when theft is legal. And you know who that hurts? It hurts poor neighborhoods. Stores close in their communities, so they have to travel farther to buy basic goods. Your progressive policies hurt the people you claim to help. Bayer looked at his notes, saying, "We are entering our fifth segment." Mr. Shapiro, you mentioned the governor's personal conduct earlier, so please expand on that. Shapiro's expression hardened, as this was personal for him. November 6, 2020. Governor, what were you doing that day? Newsom knew exactly where this was going and said, "I do not recall the specifics. Let me refresh your memory. You were at the French Laundry restaurant in Napa Valley for a birthday party for Jason Kinney, a lobbyist. There were 12 people at the dinner, indoors, with no masks, at a restaurant, charging $350 per person. The total bill was over $15,000. Shapiro pulled out the actual leaked receipt from the dinner and showed it to the camera. That same week, you told Californians they could not have Thanksgiving with their families. Restaurants were ordered closed, and small businesses were dying. You held daily press conferences telling people to stay home, wear masks, and avoid gatherings. Yet you were at a $15,000 dinner with lobbyists. Newsom had apologized for this at the time, but Shapiro was not done. Who was at that dinner? Jason Kinney, a lobbyist for the California Medical Association, and Dustin Corcoran, CEO of the California Medical Association. Other healthcare lobbyists and people who had business before the state were there. 2 months later, the California Medical Association received a $150 million contract from the state. Was that discussed over your $300 meal? That is implying corruption. Newsom countered. I am implying that you had lobbyists at an expensive dinner during a lockdown you imposed. And those lobbyists later got massive state contracts. That is called pay-to-play, and that is called hypocrisy. Shapiro pulled out more examples. Your Plumpjack wineries, your family business. During COVID, you designated wineries as essential businesses, so they stayed open. Other small businesses were forced to close, but your family's wineries operated. Then your Plumpjack businesses received $2.9 million in PPP loans. You are worth $20 million, so you did not need PPP loans, but you took them anyway while small businesses that actually needed help could not get them. Those loans went to employees, Newsom claimed. Those loans went to businesses you own, businesses that were already designated essential and allowed to operate. Businesses owned by a multimillionaire, while actual small businesses were dying. You were collecting millions in federal aid for your family's companies. The audience was restless because this was not abstract policy. This was personal corruption. Your kids, Shapiro continued, 4 children all attending Sacramento Country Day School at $30,000 per year each. That is $120,000 to $20,000 in private school tuition annually. While you tell poor families in Oakland and Los Angeles that their public schools are adequate, while you oppose school choice, and while you fight against charter schools. I support public education, Newsom said. You support it for other people's children, not for your own. You will not send your kids to the schools you force everyone else to accept. That is not supporting public education. That is elitism. That is rules for thee, but not for me. Shapiro was on a roll now, saying, let us talk about climate. You lecture about climate change, you have banned gas-powered cars by 2035, and you push for electric vehicles. And then you tell people not to charge their electric cars during heat waves because the grid cannot handle it. You mandate a technology the grid cannot support. We are transitioning, Newsom said. You are failing. You have the highest electricity rates in the continental United States, and you have rolling blackouts during heat waves. You shut down nuclear plants, and then wonder why you do not have enough power. And while you lecture Californians about reducing emissions, you fly on private jets. Your administration has taken dozens of private flights, each one producing more emissions than an average Californian produces in a year. But you get to fly private while telling workers they cannot afford gas for their cars. Every example landed, every piece of hypocrisy was documented. Newsom living by different rules than he imposed on everyone else. Here is the pattern. Shapiro said, looking directly at the camera. Gavin Newsom locks down California but goes to luxury dinners. He closes small businesses but keeps his family's wineries open. He opposes school choice but sends his kids to elite private schools. He lectures about climate while flying private. He taxes the middle class while living in a mansion. He tells people they cannot afford housing while he owns multiple properties. He is the embodiment of progressive hypocrisy. Rules for thee, but not for me. Newsom was visibly angry now, claiming you are distorting. I am showing receipts. The French laundry bill is real. The private school enrollment is public. The PPP loans are documented. And the private jet flights are tracked. These are not distortions. These are facts. Bayard tried to move forward to the final segment before closing statements. Mr. Shapiro, You wanted to discuss California's infrastructure projects, so let us talk about the high-speed rail. Shapiro said, pulling out the thickest binder yet, California high-speed rail was approved by voters in 2008. They were told it would cost $33 billion, connect San Francisco to Los Angeles, and be completed by 2020. Here we are in 2025, Governor. How many miles of operational high-speed rail does California have? Newsom knew this was a disaster and said we are making progress on the initial segment in the Central Valley. How many operational miles? Shapiro repeated. The project has faced challenges, Newsom said. How many operational miles of track can people ride on today? Silence. Zero, Shapiro said. The answer is zero. 15 years after approval and over $20 billion spent, there are zero operational miles. You have built some concrete structures, some overpasses, and some bridges to nowhere, but no functional high-speed rail. He pulled out photos of concrete pillars standing in empty fields and incomplete structures. The current cost projection is $128 billion, nearly 4 times the original estimate for a project that has produced nothing. For comparison, China built 25,000 miles of high-speed rail in the same time period. You cannot build 500 miles in California. This is complex engineering, Newsom argued. It is not engineering, as Japan built bullet trains in the 1960s. This is corruption, bureaucracy, and unions inflating costs. You are paying construction workers $150,000 a year to move dirt. The private sector could build this for a third of the cost in half the time. Shapiro had the cost breakdowns. Your project labor agreements require union wages that are triple market rates. Your environmental review process takes 7 years. Your land acquisition costs are inflated because you announce routes before buying land, so property owners hold out for maximum prices. This is not a failure of engineering. It is a failure of governance. We are committed to completing it, Newsom insisted. You have been committed for 15 years with zero results. This is a $100 billion failure that exemplifies everything wrong with California government. Overpromise, overspend, and underdeliver. Bayer jumped in saying, we are running short on time, so let us move to closing statements. Governor Newsom, you have 2 minutes. Newsom took a breath, knowing he had been battered for 90 minutes. Time to try to recover with a strong close. Thank you, Brett. Look, I came here tonight knowing that Ben would throw statistics and attacks because that is what he does. But governing is not about statistics. It is about values, and it is about vision. California represents a vision of America's future, a diverse, inclusive, innovative future where we tackle climate change, where we protect rights, and where we build opportunity for everyone. He was finding his rhythm again, back to the aspirational rhetoric. Yes, we have challenges, every state does, but we are not running away from them like Ben did. We are staying and fighting for affordable housing, fighting for good schools, fighting for clean energy, and fighting for an America that looks like California. Diverse, dynamic, and forward-thinking. Ben can throw all the numbers he wants, but he is ignoring California's incredible success. Our innovation economy, our world-leading universities, our cultural influence, and our moral leadership on issues like climate and immigration and rights. We are not perfect, but we are building the future while other states cling to the past. So yes, I am proud of California, proud of what we have accomplished, and proud of what we represent. I will continue fighting for a California and an America that lives up to our values. He sat back, thinking it was a decent close. Not great, but decent. Back to vision and values, away from the statistics that had destroyed him all night. Bayer turned to Shapiro, asking for his closing statement. Shapiro did not need notes, as he had been building to this for 90 minutes. Governor Newsom just did what he has done all night, which is talked about values when he cannot defend outcomes, and talked about vision when the reality is disaster. Let me remind everyone what we have established tonight with facts, not rhetoric. California has the highest poverty rate in America at 23.5%. That is not a vision. That is failure. California spent $24 billion on homelessness and made it 42% worse. That is not fighting for people, that is incompetence. California lost over 500,000 residents as the middle class is fleeing. That is not diversity and dynamism. That is exodus. California's schools rank 40th despite highest spending, and your own kids do not attend them. That is not moral leadership. That is hypocrisy. California has organized retail theft because you made it legal, and stores are closing. That is not progress. That is chaos. California spent 15 years and $20 billion on high-speed rail and built 0 operational miles. That is not innovation. That is corruption. Shapiro leaned forward, speaking directly to the camera. Gavin Newsom represents everything wrong with modern progressivism. He lectures about climate while flying private jets. He lectures about equity while sending his kids to elite schools. He lectures about affordable housing while living in a mansion. He lectures about following rules while breaking them at the French Laundry. He spent billions making problems worse while blaming everyone but himself. He says, I ran away from California, but I didn't run away. I escaped. Escaped from a state that taxed me into poverty despite a 6-figure income. Escaped from failing schools. Escaped from crime and homelessness and dysfunction. I am thriving in Florida with better quality of life, more opportunity, lower costs, and safer streets. That is not California's success. That is California's failure. And tonight, Governor Newsom could not defend it because his record is indefensible. His policies are disasters, and his hypocrisy is undeniable. California does not have a revenue problem, as it has the highest taxes in America. California has a leadership problem, and that problem is standing right next to me, pretending that failure is success, that exodus is desirable, and that dysfunction is vision. Californians deserve better, and Americans deserve better. Tonight, we have seen exactly why Gavin Newsom's presidential ambitions are a joke. Because if you cannot run California without destroying it, you have no business running America. Shapiro sat back and the audience erupted in applause. Not everyone, as the Democrats in the crowd stayed silent, but enough that it was clear who won this debate. Bayer wrapped up quickly saying, that concludes tonight's debate. Thank you to both participants. The cameras stayed on for another minute as Newsom and Shapiro shook hands perfunctorily. Newsom's smile was forced because he knew he had been destroyed, knew the clips would be everywhere, and knew his 2028 campaign had just been badly damaged. Shapiro knew it too. He had done what he came to do, exposed Newsom's record, made him defend the indefensible, and proved that charm does not work against facts. As the lights came down, Newsom walked off stage to his team, waiting in the wings. Their faces told him everything, that this had been a disaster. Within an hour, the internet would confirm it, as the video clips started going viral before Newsom even left the studio. Not partisan editing, just raw footage of the most devastating exchanges. California has the highest poverty rate in America. How is that a success story? Clip 1, with 5 million views in an hour. You spent $24 billion on homelessness and made it 42% worse. Clip 2, with 10 million views. You send your kids to $30,000 private schools while opposing school choice for poor families. Clip 3, with 15 million views. The French Laundry exchange. The high-speed rail failure. The U-Haul rates showing exodus. Every devastating moment captured and shared across every platform. By midnight, Shapiro destroys Newsom was trending #1 on Twitter. Not from conservative accounts pushing an agenda, but from everyone. Liberal journalists watching the debate had to admit it was a bloodbath. I am progressive, and I support Newsom's policies, but he got destroyed tonight because he could not defend the numbers. Shapiro came with receipts, while Newsom came with talking points, so facts won. That was not a debate. That was a public execution. Even MSNBC's coverage was brutal, stating Governor Newsom struggled to defend California's homeless crisis, while Ben Shapiro had specific statistics that Newsom could not counter. CNN reported Shapiro repeatedly pressed Newsom on California's poverty rate, exodus, and failed high-speed rail project, while Newsom pivoted to values but could not defend outcomes. The New York Times headline read, "In contentious debate, California governor unable to defend record." By the next morning, the full debate had been watched 40 million times on YouTube. The clips had been shared over 100 million times across all platforms. It was the most-watched political debate in years. Newsom's team went into crisis mode and scheduled media appearances to do damage control. But every interview was the same as reporters asked Shapiro's questions. "Governor, he said you spent $24 billion on homelessness, and it got worse. What is your response?" "Governor, can you explain the $750,000 per unit cost for homeless housing?" "Governor, why do your children attend private school if California's public schools are adequate?" Newsom tried the same pivots he had used in the debate about values and building the future. None of it worked because Shapiro had framed everything around outcomes, results, and numbers, and Newsom had no good answers. Within a week, his national polling cratered. He had been at 18% for the 2028 Democratic nomination before the debate, tied for second place. After the debate, he dropped to 7%, falling behind Kamala Harris, Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro, and Pete Buttigieg. Donors started getting nervous. Major California donors who had been preparing to back him for 2028 began hedging, asking if he can defend his record nationally because tonight showed he cannot. His approval rating in California dropped from 54% to 42% in 2 weeks. Republicans immediately started using debate clips in campaign ads. Gavin Newsom could not defend California's failures, so why would we give him more power? The California recall movement, always simmering but never successful, gained momentum. They would not get enough signatures to force a recall, but it showed weakness. 3 months after the debate, major companies announced they were leaving California. Each press release mentioned the same issues Shapiro had raised: high taxes, excessive regulation, cost of living, and dysfunction. "We are relocating our headquarters to Austin to provide better opportunities for our employees in a more affordable environment." Translation: California is too expensive and dysfunctional. Each announcement was another validation of Shapiro's arguments and another blow to Newsom's credibility. 6 months after the debate, Newsom held a press conference, announced he was forming an exploratory committee for 2028. It was a required procedural step, but everyone knew what it meant. He was running. The press conference was painful to watch, as every question was a variation of Shapiro's debate attacks. "Governor, how do you respond to criticism that California's poverty rate undermines your electability?" "Governor, what is your plan to address the exodus of middle-class families from California?" "Governor, business leaders cite the issues Ben Shapiro raised in your debate. So how do you win back their confidence?" Newsom gave the same answers he had given in the debate about vision, values, and future. But they rang hollow now because everyone had seen that those answers did not work when confronted with facts. A year after the debate, Newsom quietly announced he would not run for president in 2028. The official statement said he wanted to focus on finishing the important work in California. Translation: the debate had destroyed his national viability. Political analysts were blunt, stating the Shapiro debate ended Newsom's presidential ambitions. He could not defend California's record, could not explain the failures, and could not overcome the hypocrisy. That 90-minute debate did more damage than years of opposition research could have done. The debate became legendary in political circles and was taught in communications classes at universities as a case study in preparation versus charm. What happens when a polished politician faces someone with detailed facts and will not let them deflect? Conservative media called it the night Gavin Newsom's presidential dreams died. Liberal media called it a masterclass in how not to debate. Everyone agreed Shapiro had destroyed him, not through cheap shots or personal attacks, but through relentless, specific, documented facts about Newsom's record that he could not defend. Ben Shapiro's podcast the next day was straightforward. Last night was not about me destroying Gavin Newsom. It was about reality destroying Gavin Newsom. I just forced him to confront it on live television. He is a talented politician, with great hair, great smile, and great at delivering talking points. But when you actually have to defend policies with facts, charm does not work, because numbers do not care about your rhetoric. California's numbers are a disaster. Highest poverty rate, homeless epidemic, middle-class exodus, business flight, failing schools, retail theft, energy failures, and infrastructure failures. None of that is disputable because those are facts from government sources. I did not destroy Newsom. His record destroyed him. I just made him face it. The podcast was downloaded 15 million times. The debate had elevated Shapiro's profile dramatically, and he was now one of the most influential conservative voices in America. All from 90 minutes of making a governor defend his record. 5 years later, in 2030, Newsom's term as governor ended. He did not run for Senate or any other office, just quietly left politics. He went back to his family's business interests and gave occasional speeches for large fees, but his political career was over. The debate had done that. 90 minutes where charm met facts and lost, where vision met outcomes and couldn't survive, where a smooth-talking politician discovered that you cannot spin your way past systematic failure. California continued struggling with the same problems as the next governor inherited: the homeless crisis, the exodus, and the dysfunction. Some things got better and some got worse, but Gavin Newsom's legacy was set, not by his policies, not by his vision, but by 90 minutes on live television where he could not defend his record, where Ben Shapiro asked simple questions like, "Why is California failing?" and Gavin Newsom had no good answers. That was the legacy, not the presidential campaign that never happened, nor the transformative leadership that never materialized. Just a debate where facts destroyed rhetoric and everyone who watched remembered it. The debate that ended a presidential campaign. The 90 minutes that proved charm does not beat facts. The night Gavin Newsom learned that if you cannot defend your record, you do not deserve higher office. That was the California disaster debate, and it was exactly as advertised.